Just Like Us, for LGBT young people.
Good motto, Sarah.
Oh,
that's fun, isn't it?
Before we started this, James was like, I've got a really good intro.
And I did, and I used it. Good
He
morning,
really lied to
Sarah.
us all.
How are you doing today?
Good afternoon.
This fine June. It is the afternoon now.
I'm doing excellent in this, find you. We've gone very posh.
Yeah, I really have. I don't know why I don't like it. It's June, which you wouldn't know because of the weather. But primarily...
It's Pride Month!
Woo!
Yay!
Happy Pride, everybody.
Yay!
Very exciting. What are you doing for Pride?
What am I doing for Pride? Well, I've been to Oxford Pride. We both went to Oxford Pride. And we're both going to London Pride, which one makes us sound very codependent.
Yeah.
Makes it sound like we're doing a weird world tour.
Yeah. Well, I am.
Tour.
I don't know if Oxford and London are only two of my dates.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about this month?
We're actually talking about being LGBT in the workplace,
Ooh.
which is a very interesting topic.
It is. So, we had a few questions we were going to kind of talk about. Mm-hmm. So kind of the idea of being open at work and what that means to different people. There's levels of kind of openness. I mean, there's kind of going, into the closet for a workplace or a professional environment. And then there's being open, if directly asked. And then there's kind of this middle ground where you do kind of talk about it. And this, in my experience, has been kind of where I'm at. I do talk about it. I don't go out of my way to kind of hide that I'm gay. But at the same time, there's definitely a degree to which LGBT people, I think, often feel they have to tone themselves down. Like, they feel like they're being too LGBT.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very applicable to not just the workplace, in sense of, like, you go into almost, like, closet mode, where you're like, oh, okay, I'm with new people. I, like, don't know how they're going to react to me. I haven't really sussed them out yet. Yeah. So I'll go into my default mode, which is don't ask, don't tell, kind of, like, it is quite natural, I think, to go back into this idea of just my default mode. But I think there can be very positive experiences, and I think... Like, if I was looking for an employer, I'd definitely want to find one that was, like, supportive of...
Yeah, and there are a lot of supportive employers around. I mean, I was seeing something on Twitter the other day. This guy was saying that he had fired one of his, like, employees for not refusing to respect one of his other employees' pronouns.
Exactly.
There's a lot of positive, and things are getting better, obviously,
Yeah,
all the
I think
time.
so. And there's a lot of ways, I think, to be able to, like, vet companies almost now and, like, find out about their stance on these kind of things that I don't think you would have been able to, like, really do or find out before. You kind of would have had to take the chance. But there's a lot of, like, the Stonewall Index and stuff like that I think are very important in terms of choosing an employer.
I mean, we had some stats here that we were going to mention as well.
Yeah, so this is according to the Vodafone International LGBT Plus survey, which is actually from Pride Month last year, so June 2018. And they said that 41% of 18 to 25-year-olds went back into the closet when they started their first job, which is kind of very much what we were just talking about. And 3/4 of people who identify as LGBT plus have hidden their sexual orientation or gender identity at least once at work. Yeah. So I think that really, like, hammers it home. And I think the reason behind this is it says more than half were not out because they feared discrimination. So I think that's like really sums up what we've been saying.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from Taz, who works with Just Like Us, and she's going to be interviewing Zoe, who is actually a Just Like Us mentor. Enjoy!
Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Taz.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I am good, thank you. So, Zoe, do you just want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about your identity and what you do for a living?
Yes, my name is Zoe Berto. I am a pensions actuary. I'm also the diversity and inclusion coordinator for my firm, and in particular sit on the LGBT plus committee.
What does it mean to be a diversity and inclusion officer in your company?
Well, it wasn't a role that existed before I came in, so I'm still figuring that out. It kind of means that I oversee a lot of the diversity and inclusion initiatives that are going on. I work with our diversity partners, oversee our employee resource networks, and kind of just make sure that all of our strategy is aligned.
You went to university in the US, right?
Yeah, I was in the US for 3 years, and then I did a year here in London, loved it, ended up coming back, doing a master's degree, and I've been here since.
What was the experience like of moving from a university and being an out LGBT plus person to then moving into your first workplace?
It was definitely intimidating to start out. I was always really involved in a lot of diversity and inclusion work at university, part of societies, sat on committees. I was the LGBT plus officer at my university, and I didn't really know what to expect. When I first joined, there was an LGBT plus network, but it wasn't very long-standing. It was still sort of finding its feet, didn't have very many people involved. So I got in touch with the chair of the network as soon as I joined, and essentially said, looks like you've started something here. Is there anything I can help with? What can I do? I want to support. I want to be involved.
Could you identify anything either in the company, in the way that the company behaved, or about yourself that made you decide the LGBT network is not the most developed here, but I can step in and try and develop it?
I guess the biggest thing for me is that I didn't have another network necessarily. So I'm not really involved in sports. There were some other networks, but they really weren't, I didn't really have a place somewhere else in the company. Because I'm from the US, I'd lived in London for a year during my master's, but a lot of my good friends from that degree were international students who went back home. So I really didn't know very many people. I didn't have a very broad personal network in the city, and was trying to just find a place where I fit.
Is there anything that you would get a school leaver or a university leaver to think about or do to prepare themselves for being LGBT in the workplace?
I think that it's fair and normal to be a little bit worried about the unknown. Obviously, the transition from school or from university into the workplace is big. There are so many things that are changing. Mm-hmm. So having another thing to throw into the mix, which is how am I going to tell people about my identity? How are they going to react? What if I don't tell them and they find out? It's really normal to be worried about those things. I think that the best thing that you can do is take power and control of that situation. Mm-hmm. For me, grasping it head on and getting really involved was helpful. I think that it gave me a network of people who I identified with, who were supportive of me. I've done so much more networking across different levels and different jobs and even different companies, both in my industry and outside of my industry, because I was really involved from day one. And, like some people have their sports groups or whatever that it is, it was my place.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
I mentioned to Sarah I have a bit of experience with this. So I was working at a summer camp over the summer. Surprisingly.
I tend to work at those during winter.
I was working at summer camp with these kids who were 12. And it was the first time I was working on this camp since coming out. And so I am quite aware, specifically with 10 to 12-year-olds, that it's in environments where you're working with kids, you're quite aware, weirdly, that you kind of represent this role model of LGBT-ness, even if you don't really want to be that role model.
I think because also you think back to your childhood of there was that person and you want to be that person to the children.
So I was kind of really aware that if I was kind of out with these kids, that would be I'd be a person in their heads who was kind of like that. I ended up not coming out. I ended up avoiding the topic. I actually fully ran away when one child asked me if I had a girlfriend. I was like, goodbye. And they were 10, so they would not have cared.
Yeah.
But my employer, my manager, told me not to mention it. I said I was thinking about mentioning this to some of the kids, just in passing. I wasn't going to sit them all down and be like, I'm gay. And she was like, I think just don't bother. I think it's going to be a complicated thing for them to understand. And I think that's some of very prevalent attitudes that you get in some places. This idea that it's a complicated thing. I mean, these kids were 10, 12. They definitely would have.
Yeah, I think that definitely links back to what we were talking about a couple of episodes ago in terms of the LGBT education in schools, because I think there's this disconnect where adults seem to think it's a super complicated topic because they find it complicated, whereas kids are kind of you're like, oh, I have a girlfriend, oh cool, and then they run off and they go graze their knees or something. It's not a huge moment to them, I think.
Yeah, and I ended up, so I mean, it's kind of interesting because I ended up being very kind of gay in air quotes. bit in my personality, because I almost kind of upped it a bit more because I couldn't say that I was gay, but I still wanted to if any of those kids were LGBT. Just because I was very aware that, like, well, if I'm not gonna, you know, be able to talk about this or mention it, I'm at least going to be a role model in sort of a
like
hidden
representation.
way.
I know what you mean, like hidden in plain sight, kind of.
But it was a very strange kind of experience to be in, and I think a lot of people go through similar situations, like where they feel like they can't come out because of like discrimination.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
Wow, so good convo, good chat, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'll see you next month.
Yeah, that's it from us this
It's
month.
been a pleasure as always. I will probably see you in between because we are actually friends.
I mean, he keeps trying to push this, and I'm just like, don't talk to me unless we're recording the podcast.
Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful Pride, everybody.
Yeah, happy
See
Pride.
ya.
Bye.
You've been listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people. The music was by Twisterium. We come into schools too. Young people, teachers and parents can find us at www.justlikeus.org.